Thanks very much for joining us today. Let me give you a sense of who we have on the line in the audience, and then I'm going to turn it over to Robert Birdall for a welcome and introduction. This is a special webinar, comes just before the APLU conference and the AAMC conference happening over the next 2 weeks in Seattle. Today on the line, we've got folks in academic affairs and research leadership, both on general academic university campuses and in medical schools and academic medical centers. And it's a great time to talk about strategies for collaboration between the overall university and the medical center and the medical school. I've got several good examples today. Let me give you a sense of the agenda. First, Robert Birdall is going to give a little context and introduction for this discussion. I'll give a brief update on several initiatives here to academic analytics. Kirk Dombrowski from the University of Vermont will talk about sustaining collaboration across campus there, in particular with their medical school. And John Darsee and Marty Scholtz from the University of Iowa will talk about innovation strategies to attract and retain top faculty. And Carolyn Whitaker will wrap up discussion and lead Q&A. Well, Bob, let me turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Matt. And let me say, very few people refer to me as Robert. I'm Bob to most everyone. I want to welcome you all to this webinar, and especially welcome the guests from AAMC. I think this is the first time that we've had the opportunity to share some of academic analytics more broadly with people from medical schools, and to discuss the collaborations that we can demonstrate with academic analytics. So welcome. I hope that you all are having a good day. Our theme here today is one university, and how to strengthen collaborations, how deans and provosts can strengthen collaborations across their campus. Very frequently, we note that campuses have particular separations between the general campus and the medical center. But the various parts of the university are often separated into silos by distance, as the case may be, with medical centers located somewhat more remotely, with sort of budgetary structures that may separate units in the university, by the kind of cultures that differ across the campus between medical centers and the general university, and also by the absence of data about what potential collaborations can be undertaken, what collaborations are currently going on. And so today we're going to talk about some examples of collaborations that are being fostered and encouraged across the campus. It's increasingly important, it seems to me, that we present our donors, that we present the state legislatures in the case of public universities, and especially the general public, about the university as a university and not simply a collection of different schools and colleges. I think that part of the decline in public confidence in universities is that we don't always present a unified message, and I think that's going to be increasingly important as we go forward. We often say that medical breakthroughs or scientific breakthroughs are a result of people standing on the shoulders of others. As you look at a university, everyone stands on the shoulders of others, and demonstrating how we stand shoulder to shoulder, collaborating with one another, sharing that information publicly, as we can do now with academic analytics, I think is an extremely important kind of thing. We will be talking here today about collaborations between the general campus and medical centers, as well as sharing data that may help others find outside collaborators or entrepreneurial initiatives that they can undertake. So it seems to me, an extremely important kind of conversation for us to have and to foster. We now have more data than we've ever had on medical centers. And I think, can help a great deal with those of you who are in leadership positions, both sides of the aisle, from medical centers and from the general campus. So let's look at this and see ways in which we think academic analytics can really be helpful in fostering those collaborations and identifying potential collaborations going forward. With that, I'll turn it back to Matt. Matt, you want to take it from there?
Great. Thank you, Bob. Many of your campuses use academic analytics already, but I'd like to give you a sense of the projects that are in motion now, and a special thank you to the APLU executive committees and particular leaders within AAMC who really pushed us the last 20 years driving this. At bottom, academic analytics is a single source of interinstitutional knowledge about your faculty, faculty elsewhere, research strengths, external partnerships, and alumni careers. We started about 20 years ago putting together the only known data interinstitutionally about how universities compare among peers with regard to these factors. Since then, those analyses have become much more sophisticated, thanks in large part to your direction here and letting us know what your needs are. Over the last few years in particular, there's been a great focus on faculty equity and finding under-recognized faculty. We'll see more about that as we go on. The last 2 or 3 years in particular, there's been a big focus on international data, bringing in more data about international collaborations and the flow of funding, collaborativeness and interdisciplinarity, and following alumni after they leave the university. This has culminated in 5 projects that are in motion now, and I'd like to give you a sense of where they stand and ask for your feedback, both at upcoming conferences and over the next year. First, Bob mentioned having data now, extensive data in medical centers and medical schools. For those campuses that have used academic analytics before, you'll know this is new. The whole medical data set just came online over the last year. I talked to many medical deans who are looking for ways to have a more holistic understanding of their research strengths that goes beyond just funding and expenditures, to look at the scholarship that funding empowers, connections across campus, say to the rest of the university or to external peers. And I'm hearing innovative ways of using that data, like reducing long-run retention costs among medical faculty by identifying those who are at greatest retention risk and looking at empirically informed faculty development opportunities for them. Seeing a lot of interest too in calibrating different types of faculty career tracks in medical schools, using this data to look at real research strengths compared to peers, looking at the trajectory of both people and units over time to have a more informed strategic conversation about where we're growing. The second is looking at the full landscape of industry connections. I've worked with a number of research officers that are frustrated by not having a full view of the multiple touch points to industry partners across the university. Those touch points may reside with departments, with faculty, across the schools, for instance, or they might be centrally managed. But having a single view of all of those touch points can be very helpful in reaching out, developing new opportunities, new partnerships, and also benchmarking that among peers to know where there's particular strength, particular concentration and density of those relationships. Third new project coming online over the last year here is looking at the flow of alumni after they leave the university. We've got about 45 to 50 universities now that are using this data as the canonical source of alumni careers after they leave, from bachelor's to master's, doctoral, MDs, residents, and postdocs, following their career with regard to where they work, what type of position they're in, their likely salary, and mapping that data by geography too. I've seen a number of public universities in particular use this, talking about the success their alumni are having in their careers, district by district in their state, for instance, and being able to put some real data behind that success in their work with external stakeholders. The third here, you can surmise from all of this, there's a great deal of information about faculty, and that all comes together to be useful to reduce the burden on faculty for managing their own profiles and workflows. We hear across a number of universities frustration from faculty at having to enter data multiple places, keep up their profiles over time, things that are in theory available elsewhere. And this is a great way of reducing that burden and delivering value back to faculty. A number of faculty can also use this to find, for instance, grants that might support their work, or suggestions of prestigious outside awards that they would be a good fit for that they haven't been nominated for. So there are great ways to help an individual faculty member advance their own career too. And lastly, in the domain of research security, this is the latest thing to come online here. We're hearing a strong demand to use this data to reduce the compliance burden and be more proactive in research security efforts to protect the reputation of faculty and mitigate the overall institutional risk, and increase the impact of faculty outreach in the research security domain. It's important to be able to understand, for instance, where there are multiple touch points that span sensitive areas, faculty doing work, for instance, with U.S. military or U.S. federal sources, their connections abroad, their U.S. and international corporate interests to which they're connected. All of that data comes together to help you and your team be much more proactive and streamlined in this space. I'd like to say a big thank you to the APLU and AAMC executive communities, in particular from the APLU, the Council on Research and Academic Affairs, who've really shaped these efforts the last few years. If there are questions about this, happy to address them now or later. But now, with pleasure, let me turn over to Kirk Dombrowski, Vice President for Research at the University of Vermont. Kirk, let me pull up your PowerPoint and let me say welcome. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Thanks, Matt. So I think, the charge here was to try and say a little bit about what are I won't go too much into the challenges, but how are ways that we're working around trying to create collaborations that go across our campus into the College of Medicine and then across broadly. UVM is we can go to the next slide, Matt. UVM is a comprehensive place. We have a College of Agriculture. We're not giant, but we have a smaller version of everything: College of Arts and Sciences, Engineering, Ag and Life Sciences. We have statewide extension. We're land grant, sea grant, and all of the various entities. But UVM and has an old College of Medicine, and I started with that because the fact that we're an old university with an old medical college and an old state actually plays all different ways into the equation. The medical college is a really vital part of giving UVM credibility. We're an old school, and we're in a state where we don't produce a lot of high school graduates. And so we're in the unusual position of being a state flagship university where about 80% of our students come from outside the state. And having a recognized national medical college is really a big part of that attractiveness. It gives us credibility in that space. The medical system is the UVM medical affiliate. Our hospital system across the state depends on us having a successful medical college to be able to deliver. And so in our sort of broader view, this is a really necessary partnership. We're an outsized university, as I said, with a lot of students coming from out of state. And so the result of some of this, though, is that we have to pay a lot of attention to tuition and research income, and we have to collaborate broadly across that space. And so we have joint departments that live both within the College of Medicine and outside the College of Medicine. This is departments like biochemistry or molecular biology. These are departments that we want to have an undergraduate major in. College of Medicine wants to have a full department in, so they live simultaneously in two colleges, both within the same department, within the College of Medicine and the College of Agriculture. So we have this sort of built-in overlap, and we can go to the next one, Matt. We also have this physical overlap. This is our picture of our central campus, dorms over on one side, and you can see right square in the middle of the central campus is our hospital, UVM Medical Center, sort of sandwiches the quad. One older version on the bottom of your screen, the newer version on the top. This is the only level 1 trauma center north of Boston. And then right next to it in the 4 buildings connected right over is the College of Medicine. But as you can see, they're surrounded by our central campus, engineering and business, and our ag campus, et cetera. So we are really piled on top of each other and have been for a very long time. And that's part of why we're able to do more, and part of why we kind of have to do more. We can go to the next one, Matt. So in talking about how do you do this, we've tried to really go with a data-driven approach, as we mentioned before, trying to figure out where and how our departments are already collaborating and learning to feed that. And, we all know, if you're on the seminar, you know exactly what the challenges are. You have two very different business models of time and of how this goes. It creates very different kinds of incentives for folks on one side of campus versus the medical college to collaborate. So rather than try and figure out how we do this whole cloth, we spend a lot of time finding places where things are already happening and trying to accelerate those. So we foster a kind of interdisciplinary through things like interdisciplinary PhD programs. We track things through a lot of shared services. We've centralized a lot of things so we can see it. And then we use data to find out where things are actually happening and try and seed back into those areas. And that's actually been really successful. Over the last 4 years, we've gone from about 130 million in sponsored projects to about 260 million. So we've had a really good run of it by trying to really use the data to focus down in. We can go to the next one, Matt. So how do you do it? I mean, sort of emotionally in my office, what do we think about as the key pieces to bringing this along, and what tools do you have? I mean, talent recruitment and retention, as we just mentioned, is the biggest challenge for us in Vermont. It was the biggest challenge when I was at Nebraska. I honestly don't think anyone is outside of the talent race right now. And so how do you get people to come and to build and to stay? The coming part is probably the most difficult, but the real question for us is, once we have them, how do we keep them? And I think a lot of what we're talking about here about building those bridges is a way to retain people. They have colleagues that they can't reproduce easily in other places, and that's a big part of it. We do a lot of work with dual appointments, and then we have a lot of emphasis on centralized services that actually put our team in touch with lots of different pockets. Silos don't break themselves down naturally. You kind of have to have teams that are actually intent on dipping into each of these areas in different ways. We can go to the next one, Matt. So some of that involved a lot of centralization of core facilities. I was joking with the team earlier that every year at APLU, the vice presidents for research get together and lament the fact that we never have enough money to fund all of our course, and they'll never ever break even. And but we've tried to just own that. And so we've done a couple of things around reducing equipment redundancy. We have a centralized equipment maintenance, logging, sharing platform and staff. We also have built a staff around taking care of the medical equipment in the hospital systems. We have about a 45-person engineering staff that actually goes around and manages equipment broadly. And that's really helped us. But I would say the biggest thing that we did, particularly in a couple of our cores, that made the big difference was we just asked our core directors to be really honest with us. Don't give me a balanced budget in June and then come back the following May and say, oh, it turns out this year again I'm $120,000 short. Let's just talk about what it's actually going to take to run the core, because for me, the worst time to ask me for money is May. The best time to ask me for money is June. And so let's just be upfront about what this is really going to cost for a year. And then instead of just saying, well, this handout that was going to come in May is that you were going to ask for in May, you asked for up front. We've tried to do that in a way that allows us to incentivize core use. So we give out all of our sort of budget closing funds from my office to the cores in the form of vouchers. And that is that for them to get that money that they know they're going to need to operate, we make them find folks who want to use the core, come to our office, get the voucher, which then they give to the core, and the core gets the money for that piece. It does a couple things for us. It allows us to track who's using a core that doesn't have the money to use it. And maybe that's for very good reasons for the first few times that they're trying to seed a grant, and also, but if we see them, if they're frequent flyers and we see them every year, we know we have to focus on those faculty. But also it allows us to get the corps to actually be actively participating in recruiting the folks that they bring. I think the other thing about corps and long-term is to really, very few universities pay enough attention to lifetime or life cycle decisions on their corps. We tend to have really short-term budgeting expectations. If you were a business, you'd be depreciating that piece of equipment against costs in all kinds of ways. And I think we actually just have to be, in fairness to our corps, be a lot more sensible about. We want them to act like a business, then we should actually let them act like a business in a certain way, and actually let them think about life cycle and some of those things that aren't normally done. Yeah, I think we can go on from there, Matt. I'm trying to be respectful of time because I know we have other presenters. So the other issue that we really spent a lot of time chatting about when we were sort of putting together the idea of this is thinking about sort of partnership. And I guess we had a couple points on this slide. One is, we really should look at where our value lies and be open with each other about that. I think that there's a tendency in places where you have a medical campus on a college campus more broadly. Some of that separation comes from things we've talked about, different business models. Some of it just comes from ideas that we're all alike at the College of Medicine, or we're all alike outside of that, and there's a kind of implied uniformity. And one of the ways we've really tried to break that down is using data to look at, hey, look, even within each side of these, where are your high performers and where are the areas that aren't going so well? And one of the real best ways to break down some of these silos is to say, one of the ways that you can get help with your weaker performers is actually maybe outside of your unit rather than inside. And this will be a theme I pick up on the next slide. We really just have to be a lot more honest with ourselves a lot of the time about what we're seeing. This was a nice graph, I think, for the opposite point, which is that you can find departments that are punching way above their weight. And at a smaller university, like the University of Vermont, we have to be efficient with our talent and our money. We can't play the law of averages on a lot of things because our departments are smaller. So we really have to pay a lot more attention to where we're getting overperformance and good bang for our buck. We can go on now. So finally, sort of what are the takeaways from this? I think that that you have to take really seriously the idea that culture is real, that people actually have value systems and a value architecture that they're making decisions by that maybe they can't articulate, but that are built out of the systems they work in. If you're in a medical college and you're looking for salary support through grants, you're going to distribute your effort across a whole bunch of different grants in small pieces, and you're going to buffer in that kind of way. And someone coming across campus and saying, who's got 9 months salary guaranteed, saying, I have this great idea for this giant high-risk project, is not going to be unappealing because the topic is unappealing. It's going to be unappealing because it doesn't fit a reward structure. So I think we have to be just really upfront about that. And we have to be really upfront about the fact that the systems that we put in place to manage these things, like budgets, create incentives that may work directly against what we think we're doing as an institution. And some of these I can't tell you how many times I have people who make decisions on collaboration based on an annual budget number that they actually are going to be expected to hit for their chair. And that is I'll just say it out loud, that's the dumbest criteria on which to make any decision at a university, is on some small over-under on an annual number when we know we're going to have backfilling to that to the next year and so on. So I think we just have to be really conscious of the limits that our systems set. Next one, Matt. Yeah, and so this came up in between planning this seminar and so on. Matt and Bob and others said, boy, you just got a tech hub. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I said, sure, I'm willing. This was another part of our research growth work, has been to really reach out to industry partners. So this was not a high priority for UVM. Our new president, when he came, Suresh Garamella, in 2019, came from Purdue, where corporate partnerships was a really important piece when he brought me in from Nebraska, where I had a partnership portfolio in my previous job. And so we right away started reaching out to find out what was happening in the corporate partnership space. So this is a collaboration we're doing on AI-based chip design with Global Foundries and Green Mountain Semiconductor and a whole bunch of other high-end users of or anticipated users of next-gen chip manufacturing. This is in the heavier wafer style chips that are in the 5G, 6G communication realm, military use, and so on. And we did it by pulling together some strengths that we had on campus, again, knowing and using some data-driven approaches to find where we had overachieving folks, and then reached out with them to start building some meaningful corporate partnerships, joint lunches, sharing students, bringing up the possibility of joint hires. We worked out a very straightforward IP policy. We sort of tore up a lot of agreements when I first got here and put in place an IP policy that allows folks in the corporate side to know a lot more about what their costs are up front, and promises for the university side to deal with these issues around royalties and licensing with corporate collaborative IP in much more of a downstream balloon payouts, and that's triggered by some of their corporate growth. So we've tried to really rearrange some of the IP arrangements, and it worked out at this point to give us an opportunity for this prize and maybe for some other things that EDA has lined up on this. So if there's questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer it. It's kind of off topic, but seemed timely. Then more timely for John and Marty's talk coming up afterwards. Segue.
Great. Thank you, Kirk. We have a few questions coming in the sake of time. Let me go ahead and pivot over to our other presentation here. And let me welcome to the stage John Darsee, Chief Innovation Officer at University of Iowa, and Marty Scholtz, Vice President for Research there. Welcome. Marty, the floor is yours.
Yep. Thank you, Matt. Thanks to the academic analytics team, and thank you, Kurt, and congratulations on that Hub Award. That's a very heavy lift, and we wish you all the best of luck, and I'm sure it'll be very successful. So, thank you all today to join in on us. John Darsee and I have a slightly different presentation where we're going to focus a little bit more on some strategies that we have used at the University of Iowa to help our faculty, particularly our faculty in the College of Medicine, to innovate and lower some barriers for them. So I'm going to kick off a little bit and talk, sort of frame up the University of Iowa and to give you some background, and then John will describe his role on campus, which I think is unique amongst at least a lot of the universities I know. The University of Iowa is the public university here in the state of Iowa. It's the flagship university for the Iowa. We've been around for a long time and a member of the AAU since about 1909. We have a little north of 30,000 students. We have 12 academic colleges, pretty much one of every sort of college we have. Lots of areas of study, lots of graduate programs, and we have, and particularly germane to this discussion, a nationally recognized academic medical center, which is part of a larger health science campus and complex. This picture is particularly germane for a lot of the discussion we were talking about today. This is the Iowa River, which in June through early July of 2008 flooded. Some of you may remember that event, but it flooded most of campus and really made the University of Iowa think through a lot of ways we were doing things. It's actually the river that separates on the right side of this, which you can barely see, as the health campus for the most part, where we have not only a College of Medicine, but a College of Public Health, Nursing, Pharmacy, and Dentistry. And then on the left is sort of, if you will, the general academic campus, if you will, liberal arts and sciences, engineering, and the like. More importantly, is there's at least 5 bridges that you can see in this picture that span across the river. And it's these bridges that are really important because they are Some of them you can walk. There's one that's only for trains. Some of them you drive, but there's lots of ways to get back and forth. And that's one of the things that we were going to talk about today on how to do that. So next slide. We're just short of $600 million in annual research expenditures right now. You can see in this slide the 2008, 2009 little dip there. That again is the flood, right? Where our attentions were diverted to other activity like bringing the campus back online. Next slide, which really highlights our focus on health and academic health and medicine. Our portfolio is very highly enriched in NIH and HHS funding. Over 60%, about 60% of our external funding is from that agency, which reflects the huge presence of our academic medical center and our health-based research. But we also have a few other notable areas. We have a long-standing program that's highly funded from NASA that has a legacy that goes back to the 1960s. The Van Allen belts, which are sort of the radiation belts, if you will, around the Earth, were named after James Van Allen, who was a University of Iowa space physicist. We now have Van Allen Hall, which houses the Department of Physics and Astronomy. And a long legacy of University of Iowa has built an instrument on almost every satellite that has left the Earth over the last many years, and that legacy continues with a whole flock of young investigators now. Next slide, and I want to give a little introduction to our healthcare and medical enterprise because it is sort of the focus of today. We are an integrated healthcare enterprise with hospitals and clinics, a physicians group, and a college of medicine. So those of you that are AAMC friends will sort of recognize this model of the synergy between patient care, research, and education that's all housed within an academic medical center or healthcare enterprise. Next slide, please. Yep, the hospitals and clinics themselves. There are some stats on them. We are the only academic medical center in the state of Iowa. There's a lot of visits here. Lots of people come to our medical center. Just sort of for a little comparison, the state of Iowa has about 3 million people in it. So you can see we touch a lot of patients in the state in various ways, at being the tertiary quaternary care center with a national cancer, with a comprehensive cancer center that's funded by the NCI, for example, is just one of the many things that we have in our hospitals and clinics. Next slide then, Matt. The College of Medicine is obviously the academic arm and where a lot of the basic research is done to complement the clinical research that we share with the hospital and that mission. You can see the size of the faculty and the number of medical students, the number of programs. We have highly ranked programs in physical therapy, rehabilitation, those kinds of things, in addition to fully accredited medical school and those types of programs as well. And then I think the next slide then, what I want to do is kind of set up one of the things that's unique about the University of Iowa. So on the right is something that's not so unique. Most universities have a VPR's office who provides lots of services. Some of them are listed here, those that especially touch entrepreneurship, where we have sponsored programs office, technology transfer offices, of course, lots of compliance, especially the compliance here that discusses conflict of interest in research. We have a number of core facilities. Kirk did a great job of describing how core facilities at universities work and sometimes don't work so well and the challenges we have there. But we offer our core facilities also to faculty who have new ventures that are setting them up, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We have a business school that also has obviously lots of entrepreneurial programs together with colleges of engineering and others, sometimes focused on undergraduates, but not exclusively. So our business school has an entrepreneurial center. And then the thing that we have that I'm going to turn this over to John to describe is we have this in the middle, sitting in the middle of all of this is an Office of Innovation, which is separate from either of these units, which I think gives it some unique flexibilities and unique advantages that I'm going to let John Darsee, the Chief Innovation Officer of the University of Iowa, describe So John, take it away.
Thank you, Marty. Yeah, about 6 years ago, the former president of the University of Iowa, Bruce Harold, reached out to me. I was in the medical industry and had been for 35 years and just was exiting a Stanford Biodesign created startup that went public and has been really successful and has a market cap of about $2.5 billion today. He called me to say, would you come back to the University of Iowa? And he was a business guy, not really an academic that came to Iowa. And he thought, the skills it takes to run an economic development org versus the skills it takes to run a large research org are not necessarily always complementary. And that it would be a really good idea to separate these functions and have someone dedicated with the business background to these functions. So this is just before Marty arrived. We kind of got here at the same time, but this was already in place, and we set this thing up. So tech transfer sits with Marty and his team, and then most of the other business development elements fall under me. I only focus on faculty. Iowa has 70% of our intellectual property that is created is on the medical campus, and yet, as Marty said, Iowa's like Vermont. Iowa has 3,000 or 3 million people and very little medical infrastructure within the state. So for those would-be entrepreneurs on campus, where are they going to turn? Next slide. So we set out to do, three things I recognize immediately. A lack of talent, as Kirk spent a lot of time talking about. We need to find experts that have industry experience in the same lane as our researchers to help mentor them, help them move forward, help them pivot when necessary, help them find resources and capital. So talent was a big issue that we needed to import. Capital was a huge issue. There was no venture capital money in the state of Iowa that really understood the conundrum of how long it takes to move an idea on a medical side to fruition. And then culture, too, another piece that Kirk really focused on that I've been clearly focused on since I got here, is that we need to make the idea of innovation acceptable to a larger percentage of folks on campus. To those who have these instincts, we need to make sure they understand where to go to get these creative outlets fulfilled. Next slide. So these are all the pieces I have. And basically the message here is that there's a continuum from early research or a surgical idea on a napkin all the way through toward commercialization. So our mission is to have all the aspects necessary for them to walk through that continuum. And then we act as stewards. And we're sort of independent of all other units on the campus. So I report into the vice president of external relations and strategic communication with a dotted line to the president. And so that gives me this independence to work with various elements on campus. And again, to Kirk's, when I got to here, coming from industry, it was very difficult to navigate a large, decentralized, often siloed academic institution. I mean, I am lucky I made it through and figured it out, because it was so frustrating coming from a business where everyone is sort of lockstep and moving in the same direction at all times. This was very difficult for me to kind of figure out and navigate. And I early on, I got this, someone said, you just have to find the coalition of the willing. And that's kind of been the mantra. We know maybe only 5% of faculty have entrepreneurial instincts, but we just have to be there to fulfill them and move it forward. Next slide. Next slide. So when I got here, the first thing I did was start to speak with the deans about who were the superstars in their area that had these instincts to pursue. And they often knew about them, but they weren't spending much time thinking about them or thinking about the value of that individual. And very often, those same individuals were the most productive, most respected of their peers in their departments. And when we started creating that kind of awareness amongst the deans, there became a recognition that these tools that we were providing was a creative outlet for that faculty that is really helpful to keeping them here. And Kirk talked about this as well, right? Retention is a huge deal, but also attraction. So some of the faculty come in here, particularly younger, newer faculty that are building their reputations, want to solve unmet needs in healthcare, more so than they want to research. But that's a challenge as you move toward tenure. So we've provided a lot of these resources that I think have helped attract faculty and is helping retain them. So this is a big piece of what we are doing. But we also had to figure out a way to get to more faculty in a really large decentralized campus. How do we do that well? So one thing we did was we went out to the Kauffman Foundation, and along with the University of Missouri, we won a grant from them to study what attracts faculty to entrepreneurial pursuits. So we interviewed 9 Midwestern universities with a similar profile to us to kind of get an idea of what really worked. And one of the programs we found from the University of Nebraska, Kirk, we stole it from them, was this Innovation Leadership Fellowship Program. So that's an opportunity to take trainees, MD, PhD students, postdocs, graduate students in engineering, bring them together and teach them some of these fundamentals. I call them kids, of course. These kids either had entrepreneurial instincts in their family history, or they just wanted to solve unmet needs, or they really wanted to have industry connections so they can think about other ways in which they're going to use their academic experience in their careers. They became ambassadors for us around campus. So we teach them the basic premise. We bring Marty's team in to talk about tech transfer and licensing and what that means, and when you disclose and patenting. And then they're out, rubbing shoulders in a research lab or on a clinical rotation, and they meet faculty that have an idea that may not have any idea where to turn. So they funnel them back to us. And this has been a really successful program that has very, very much helped our mission. I think that Matt can talk to these things, but this is really important data that I haven't had access to until now. But I want to know which I stumble across these faculty that have interesting external connections, but I just stumble across them. I haven't had a uniform way in which to connect them and then to bring them back to the deans and strategize around how we can leverage their relationships, as well as kind of strengthen their commitment and our commitment to them at the University of Iowa. Matt, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. These are just 3 empirically informed examples of how to find those faculty. Some evidence I've seen about faculty turnover suggests, wait 10 years and half the faculty will be new, particularly in engineering and medicine areas. And so, especially among those early career young faculty, it's very important to get to know them, but often those are the most difficult to get to know quickly, while you can make a difference and really influence some of the levers, John, that you're talking about moving. 3 examples here, looking at those who are already super collaborators, particularly across discipline boundaries. Once you bring the data to bear, it pops off the page to see who has strong connections within their own unit, within units across campus, and with collaborators at other universities. And knowing who those people are early can be precisely the people you want to target. Next, looking at those who already have strong industry connections. I mentioned at the top of our discussion here, new data that illuminates existing industry connections between faculty and external collaborators. Some of that, a lot of it we're finding campuses do not know in a systematic way, and being able to lay out where those touch points are, who has them, and in whom they're concentrated can be an important signal to find precisely those faculty, John, that you're talking about. Last one here, this makes me very excited, is finding early career faculty who the data suggest will be retention risks, and finding ways to engage those faculty so that they see their full intellectual home and their career future there at the university by building the ecosystem around them that really meets their needs and provides that kind of intellectual home. This is in part a question of fact. I find often those faculty, some of them may have a big personality on campus, may already be known, but often it's those faculty who you don't know yet, whose work suggests that they are retention risks. Those are the ones you want to get to know. And often that breaks down along the lines of where faculty from underrepresented groups, for instance, are among the least appreciated for being, in fact, high retention risks. And having a good empirically informed way to do that is a nice way also to undercut the bias that would normally govern that process. Back to you, John.
Do we have another slide?
Here we are.
I just, I guess I think to conclude is just simply that it has been interesting journey to try to bring the resources to campus. And at least I had a 35-year career in the medical device field, so I had the ability to gather resources and individuals to help support our network and build a network of collaborators to actually help with every step of the way that faculty might be maneuvering. I will say it's a lot harder to maintain those relationships when they are connected to me and not necessarily connected to the University of Iowa. So we've worked very closely with the foundation to try to find more of the individuals that have serious industry experience that would be helpful to our would-be entrepreneurs. But it's an ongoing battle. So I think Kirk was saying the same thing. Talent is the #1 challenge that we face. And I suspect it will continue to be. We were talking about some of the things we're doing on an early start. I mentioned a medical innovation hub that we have built at the University of Iowa that we just got funding for. And the key, though, is proximity. And I think we've all talked about that. We're lucky in that at UVM and the University of Iowa, we have everything on the same campus, which is a huge advantage. But we haven't necessarily taken advantage of that to the extent that we could. One of the things we're doing now is we're building a medical innovation hub, but it has to be proximate to the day job of those researchers and clinical faculty, right? They can't drive 5 miles out to a research park. They've got to be able to walk between the two. And we finally, after 5 years, we've got that space. We're building that out now, and it's in an old pharmacy building. It's walking distance and tunnel distance from everything on the medical campus. So that'll be incredibly important. The other thing was just one step at a time. You got to take it, singles and doubles. Don't worry about hitting home runs. And this helps. This is our approach with tech transfer too, right? We want to try to move these things forward. I think of us as a AAA farm club in baseball terminology, because we get a lot of really talented faculty that come from the East or West Coast with incredible pedigrees, build their relationships or their career here, and then they leave again. So how do we continue to attract more of them, and keep them here? So this is really important for us. Engagement with entrepreneurs and venture capitalists has made an enormous difference. My previous company at Stanford, we raised $120 million from venture people in Silicon Valley. Many of them I've been able to get to campus, and that the faculty just eat that alive because they never get that exposure. It's very, very rare. So that is a key element of what we're trying to propagate, is bring these people. And you don't need a lot of their time. Many times it's 30 minutes on a call about a particular question about regulatory, reimbursement, manufacturability of their idea. Something like that can easily move them forward. So we're really being nimble about how we engage these experts, because we're in Iowa. It's hard to get them here. When people say, I got to change planes, I'm not coming. So we run into that issue. And we're just really trying to articulate the wins and also the losses. We know that 9 out of 10 times in a startup, you're going to fail. So there's got to be an aptitude on campus that losing is not a bad thing. You've just got to keep trying and keep working it. So we're working on the cultural aspect of that and continuing to work on the industry talent side.
Great. We have about 10 minutes left here. Let me turn next to Carol Whitaker, former Vice President for Research at The Ohio State University, to moderate our discussion. Welcome, Carol. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Matt. And thank you actually to our 3 speakers today, Kirk, Marty, and John. You gave us a lot to think about. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, we chose campuses with co-located medical centers. Both Vermont and Iowa have that advantage. Many of you on the webinar may have medical centers that are not co-located. And so we've had actually some questions come in that I'd like to actually throw out to both of the teams. So what strategies have you found helpful to encourage cross-campus collaborations within decentralized budget models? Now, I don't know whether you've you've dealt with that, but it's really about credit for the, incentivizing this and credit for these, Kirk, would you like to start?
Sure. We're in an RCM model, and so trying to figure out how you bring together places that are incentivized to be autonomous is always a challenge. One of the big things that we find really useful is to figure out ways we can get the folks who have existing centers that are within a college. At our medical school, we've got Cobry centers, we've got places like that. Outside of it, we've got a large environmental center. And if you can get 2 center directors to agree on a program that they can do, and you can match funding into something like that to buy out time for proposal prep or things like this that can mitigate some of those risks. I think doing it at the individual faculty member level, you're fighting against a whole stream of bureaucracy and budget models and chairs, budget models and everything that incentivize people to really focus on where their local world already is. But you can get through some of those further reaching, further seeing center and institute directors, ways that you can create some of that crossover. And they're really in a position to make some of those differences. And so matching incentives in that kind of space has been something that can be really useful, I would say. One good strategy.
So you rely on the individual center directors to sort of work out that negotiation.
We'll find 2 that we think have an interest in. So, most recent one, there's a big climate change and health, P30 proposal that's coming down. Well, that isn't an obvious way where we could say, how do I get this person out of this? Or I don't want to have to make that team or that decision, but I can go to our Center on Infectious Disease, talk to them, and our Center on Environment and say, this looks like both of you, if you're willing to put some effort and energy into a collaborative proposal for this, we could back that centrally with some money to buy people out of some time and get some proposal writing done, and back that with support from a proposal development team. That's the kind of thing where we can take, what's incentivized, these sort of incentivized localism, and just get them to think cross campus rather than trying to build against the sort of mainstream of the RCM model. RCMs are a challenge. I would not be an advocate for it, but it's what I got, so I'm going to work with it. But I think that it is possible if you work with things that are already incentivized within the system and just try and create that extra piece that'll cross over.
Yeah,
So Marty and John, how about at Iowa?
Sure, I can take this one. I think we also too have everybody calls them modified RCM models, which just means RCM model. We haven't had it for that long, but I think we were rather careful in thinking about this very thing. So in addition to the things Kirk talked about sort of on the front end of making arrangements, having the VPR's office put some time and effort into proposal prep and some time for that from various people. We do have sort of the so-called credit, if you will. I think you used that word, Carol, on the back end, where indirect costs, which is one of the things that the RCM centers concerned about, they do flow to where the expenditures occurred. So if there are projects between 2 colleges at the end of the year after the expenditures are all booked, then the F&A sort of flows in proportion to where those happen. So that seems to have worked well. It's added another little accounting step that somebody has to do at the end, but it does sort of remove part of this credit issue, at least from the college's point of view, right? That they are getting credit via F&A or IDC returns back to their units for the efforts of their faculty and researchers.
John, anything to add?
Yeah, I think we lead with my team. I try to get my team to lead with how do we add value to these individuals. And so whether it's at the dean level that I'm usually managing, or whether it's the center level or an individual researcher, we're trying to figure out how we can add the most value to them. So any proposal that we bring for collaboration involves us coming with money, like Kirk said. So we've got to figure out, that's the easiest thing. Not always, but it's often the easiest thing. But there's also other value adds that we bring. We're trying to build a greater connection between biomedical engineering and the healthcare campus right now. So we can act as an intermediary, providing we're bringing value on each side. And I think that's the bottom line. Do they feel like we're a trusted partner, and are we bringing value to what motivates them the most?
So I had just one more question. I think we have time for one more. And that is, John, you put a number out there for entrepreneurial faculty, the percent of faculty that you would say are entrepreneurial.
Mhm.
Kirk, I'd like to get your number, and Marty, whether you agree with that 5% number. And has that changed?
That's a guess,
over time?
Carol. That's
So I think it's an uneven distribution. So, I mean, I think you're doing exactly the right thing in building the incubator right in the middle of campus, because we're doing the same thing. We're in the middle of trying to build something right in the middle of the medical school. And it's because the early career folks that we're getting right now, this is a survival imperative. They want to know, what's the commercialization environment for me to take this job. And so I would say with the early career folks, yeah, we have 5% are probably actively working with venture funds. They're not even in the NIH game. They're already ventured up and they're working on things that have a commercialization pipeline. Broadly, that's maybe 15-20% of our early career faculty. Our later career faculty, they were brought up in the old school. They get a patent through the tech transfer. They let the licensing office take care of it from there, and that's the old model. So the entrepreneurial side, I think, is probably maybe 5% overall isn't a bad number, but I bet it's really skewed towards our early career folks. And graduate students, it's probably 40%, right? Coming in saying, hey, what's the commercialization potential of what I'm going to be working on? Could I just add one more thing to what John said? The network piece is absolutely critical. John, you may have found this. We found this. If we get one successful startup out of one department, no matter how small that department is, we'll get 2 more out of that department that maybe make it, maybe don't in the next 2 years. It's viral in that space. And so part of what we're jumping on is, as soon as we see one department start to cook in this way, we'll put a lot of attention into that space, because first, people have to see it as possible to take the risks that are involved in this. They have to see this as something that they could do. And so I really appreciated, John, the network piece that you were talking about.
Marty, anything to add?
Yeah, and I would maybe just to amplify that point a bit. I think the cultural changes is certainly the upcoming generation, and then the younger faculty are more inclined to this. There's no doubt about this. The networking thing is also critical. John didn't share, but he's talked about a couple areas that they're really working through. And if you can get not only a few deans interested, but department heads are really critical. And that's where, if you can get a department head interested, then that, as you just said, Kirk, will spread throughout that department, because their colleagues see it as value, right? And they're getting quote unquote credit for doing this kind of activity. Right?
Great.
Carol, could I ask
great answers,
John? Carol?
Yes.
Could I ask John a question?
Sure.
John, you seem to stress the importance of the structure in which your role is located, with the dotted line directly to the president. How important do you believe that is to success?
I think it was extremely important early when I got here, because I could open any door on campus. No one was going to refuse to take, my call and I think it's less important as we've shown some success and we've built a structure and relationships around campus. But early on, it was very important. And there are moments in time where I need to play that card, even today. And when I do, I definitely do. And I'm very grateful. If I would change anything, I would probably also have a dotted line to the provost. I think that would be the other thing that would help. But we know it's all about relationships, and it's as I think Matt brought it up, or maybe Kurt brought it up. 10 years and you've got half your faculty turning over. It's a constant battle. It never ends. And that was a little different for me than coming from the corporate world that I've had to try to manage.
Very good.
Thanks, Bob. We are at time at this point. Matt, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Carol. And thank you to the panel here, and thanks to the AAMC and APLU communities here who have really driven this the last few years. A few notes on things coming up. This weekend, we have a team at AAMC in Seattle. We'd love to talk with you and get your feedback on these things and others coming up over the next year. The following weekend, also in Seattle, is APLU. We've got a number of events running there. If you haven't seen those hit your inbox yet, you will. Two things coming up in the spring that might be of interest to this community. We have a panel discussion for presidents about growth strategies, in particular engaging external stakeholders. That should hit your inbox soon. We're targeting middle spring for that. Also, a panel for vice chancellors for health and academic medical center CEOs about planning for growth and understanding the peer context and folding that data into your strategic plans. With that, let me say thanks very much. Hope you have a great rest of the term, great year. Thanks for your time and your partnership as always. Have a great day. Bye-bye.